Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something that's really shaking things up out there in the working world, skill-based work. And we've got some really interesting research to dig into, excerpts from 일레오선자 글로이게 호코, which translates to skill-based hiring, the future of the labor market. And let me tell you, some of this stuff is really mind-blowing. Just think about this. By 2030, there are going to be something like 85 million high-skilled jobs just waiting to be filled. Yeah. I know that might sound kind of overwhelming, but stick with us today. We're going to really deep dive into why this isn't something to be afraid of. It's actually a huge opportunity. And to help us navigate this new world of work, we've got our expert with us. So let's start with the basics. What is skill-based work, and why is everyone making such a fuss about it?
Well, skill-based work is really about shifting our focus, Instead of putting so much emphasis on the traditional qualifications like degrees and GPA, it's about really zeroing in on the specific skills and the actual mastery that someone brings to the table. And when you think about all the changes happening in the job market right now, it makes a lot of sense. Technology is evolving at an incredible pace. Remote work is becoming the norm for a lot of people. And let's face it, the economy is full of uncertainty these days, so companies really need people who can get things done, and they need them now.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. But you frame this as an opportunity and not a threat, so I'm really curious to hear how this benefits both sides.
Yeah.
The employers and the employees.
Absolutely. Well, for starters, let's look at the impact on job performance. Research has actually shown that skill-based hiring is 5 times more predictive of success than just looking at someone's education. For instance, companies that embrace skill-based hiring, they see an average increase of 20% in employee performance. So for you, the listener, this means that your skills are your currency. It's about what you can do, not just where you went to school.
So in a way, it levels the playing field. It's less about checking off boxes on a resume and more about showing what you're actually capable of. Does that mean employers might start looking beyond those fancy universities and degrees?
Absolutely. That's one of the big advantages here. Skill-based hiring really opens up the talent pool. Companies aren't limited by this obsession with fancy degrees anymore. They can actually tap into a much wider range of candidates. And that means more diversity in the workplace, more opportunities for people who might not have had that traditional educational path.
Yeah, that's a huge win for inclusivity, recognizing talent from all kinds of backgrounds. But what about the bottom line? Does this shift also have, financial implications?
You bet it does. It's actually more cost-effective for companies to hire based on skills. Think about it. If they can pinpoint the exact skills they need and they can assess candidates objectively, well, they can fill those roles much faster. And that means lower hiring costs for them and potentially better salaries and perks for employees like you.
Okay, so better performance, a wider talent pool, cost savings. It's starting to sound like skill-based work really is a win-win. Are there any other benefits we're missing?
Well, let's talk about something that's a big issue for a lot of companies: employee retention. Did you know that a whopping 80% of workers who quit their jobs do so because they feel stuck? They don't see any opportunities for growth, no clear paths forward. And skill-based work tackles this head-on. By focusing on skills, companies can create really transparent career pathways and offer very targeted skill development opportunities.
So instead of hitting that ceiling, employees have a clear roadmap for growth. They're staying engaged, they're learning constantly, and they feel valued by their employers. I can definitely see how that would boost morale and loyalty.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of continuous learning and development, which benefits everyone involved.
This all sounds great in theory, but I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering, how does this actually work in practice? How do employers actually put these skill-based practices into action? And what can you as an employee do to make sure you're set up for success in this new landscape?
Those are great questions. And those are exactly the questions we're going to unpack as we continue our deep dive here. It all starts with understanding the 3 key areas where employers need to adapt: how they design and advertise jobs, the hiring process itself, and finally, how they approach talent retention in this new skill-based world.
Okay, so we're starting to see the bigger picture here. We're moving away from this one-size-fits-all approach to hiring, and we're embracing something much more dynamic and nuanced. So let's dive into those 3 areas you just mentioned, starting with how employers are rethinking the way they design and advertise jobs.
Yeah, so, in the past, job ads were full of these vague requirements and nice-to-have qualifications. But this new approach is all about being clear and precise. Instead of those long lists of credentials, employers are really focusing on identifying the absolutely essential skills, the ones that are really needed to excel in that specific role.
So it's a shift from what looks good on paper to what actually gets the job done. I imagine that takes a lot of introspection on the employer's part, really understanding what those core competencies are for a role.
Exactly. And that focus on core skills has to be reflected in the job ad itself. Companies need to be upfront about their skill-based approach, so if they're using things like assessments or work samples as part of the application, they should really make that clear in the job posting.
Transparency right from the start. No more surprises for the job seekers. It definitely creates a more level playing field. So let's move on to the hiring process itself. What changes are we seeing there?
Well, instead of relying solely on resumes, which, let's face it, often only tell part of the story, companies are starting to use more objective screening methods. So this could be things like work samples, where candidates actually have to demonstrate their skills in a real-world scenario, or skills assessments that measure specific competencies that are relevant to the job.
Yeah, that's a fascinating shift. It's almost like moving from a theoretical evaluation to a more practical, hands-on demonstration of someone's abilities.
Exactly. It's about seeing what they can do, not just what they say they can do. And this focus on objective measurement even extends to things like cultural fit. That's often seen as a subjective area. But companies are starting to use standardized rubrics and scoring systems to make sure everyone is evaluated fairly and consistently.
So even those more intangible qualities are being assessed in a more data-driven way, which I imagine helps to eliminate potential bias. It sounds like the whole hiring process is becoming more streamlined and focused.
And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, talent retention. In a skill-based world, retaining top talent means creating clear pathways for growth and development. It's about showing employees that their skills are valued and that there are opportunities to advance within the company.
That makes sense. Speaking of keeping those skilled employees happy, though, how does retention fit into all of this? Could focusing just on these quantifiable skills make employers overlook those valuable soft skills?
Or unconventional experience.
That's a really important point. It highlights why it's so crucial to find the right balance. While hard skills are obviously essential, soft skills like communication, collaboration, problem solving, those are equally important. And companies are realizing that the experience someone gains through those non-traditional paths, like online courses or independent projects, can be just as valuable as a formal degree, right? So it's not about throwing out the old ways of evaluating candidates completely. It's more about finding a more holistic approach, one that recognizes the full spectrum of someone's abilities. What are some concrete steps that companies can take to actually foster this culture of continuous learning and development?
Well, there are a lot of creative approaches out there. One example that's becoming increasingly popular is the DEAL concept. It stands for Drop Everything and Learn. Basically, it involves dedicating specific time for teams to engage in skill-building activities. It could be an hour every week or a monthly workshop, or even just encouraging employees to share articles and resources. The point is to make learning a priority, weave it into the fabric of the workday.
That's a fantastic idea, weaving it into the workday instead of treating it as an afterthought. I love that. It really normalizes and prioritizes the whole process of continual learning. I'm starting to see how all of this could benefit me as an employee, but I'm sure some listeners are thinking, where do I even begin?
It can definitely feel overwhelming at first, but it all starts with identifying those skills you want to develop. Think about your past experiences. What skills were in high demand? What skills could have helped you excel even further? What were your colleagues doing that impressed you?
It's like detective work almost, looking for clues in our past experiences to point us toward the skills that are going to be valuable in the future. And once we've identified those skills, what are the best ways to actually acquire them?
Well, there are so many options available these days. You've got formal education like online courses or boot camps, or you can go the self-directed learning route through mentorships, books, online resources. The key is to find what works best for you. You know what fits your learning style. Some people thrive in a more structured environment, while others prefer a more flexible approach.
It's all about tailoring that learning journey to your own needs and preferences. What role does feedback play in this process of upskilling?
Feedback is absolutely crucial. It's how we grow and improve. So seek out mentors, peers, online communities, places where you can get constructive criticism on your work. I know it can be uncomfortable sometimes, but it's really invaluable for honing your skills and pushing yourself to reach your full potential.
It's about embracing the whole learning process, the successes and the stumbles along the way. We've talked a lot about what companies need to do and how individuals can adapt. But I'm curious about the role of technology in all of this, this skills-based revolution. We touched on AI-powered guidance systems earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about how those tools are changing the game?
Well, they're becoming more sophisticated all the time. And a lot more user-friendly, too. Basically, these AI systems use algorithms to kind of analyze everything, your work history, your education, your skills, even your online activities. And then they can identify those skills you already have, even the ones you might not even realize you have. And they can suggest areas for growth, areas that align with your profile and what's happening in the job market.
Wow. So it's like having a personalized career counselor who can see all those patterns and potential in our experiences that we might miss ourselves. Are there any specific platforms or tools that you recommend checking out?
There are a bunch popping up. One that's getting a lot of attention is Degreed. It's a learning experience platform that uses AI to personalize those learning pathways for people based on their skills and career goals. Another one worth looking into is Gloat. It's an AI-powered talent marketplace that helps employees discover those internal opportunities for growth and development, within their own companies.
Those sound incredibly helpful, both for navigating the job market and for moving up in our current companies. This has been a fascinating deep dive. We hear so much about skill-based work these days, but we really broke it down today, the what, the why, and the how. And what I'm taking away from all of this is that it's not just some passing trend. It's a fundamental shift in how we approach work and learning.
I couldn't agree more. It's a shift that really empowers both people and organizations to adapt and thrive in this world that's constantly changing around us.
And it requires a change in mindset, right? For employers, it's about being more flexible, taking a more data-driven approach to managing talent. And for individuals, for all of you listening, it's about taking ownership of your skill development and seeing learning as a continuous journey, not just a destination.
That's a great way to put it. It's about embracing that lifelong learning, staying curious, being open to those new opportunities.
We've covered so much ground today. Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. We talked about the potential of AI to help us identify our skills and figure out our career paths. So how can you leverage those insights? How can you unlock your own potential and really thrive in this exciting new world of work? It's a question worth exploring. As you navigate your own skill-based journey, a huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible insights and expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and empowering. Remember, the future of work is in your hands. Embrace your skills and keep learning.